Hi and welcome to Poly Originals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So for today's video I'm doing something very different. There's not a tutorial, it's not a step-by-step cane design or anything like that. This is a simple response to questions I get asked a lot about how do I clean my pasta machine. Now there are loads of wonderful tutorials out there, videos out there showing you how to dismantle the machines, how to really get all the clay off and everything else. However, those of you who know me know that I'm sort of slightly impatient in certain things, so I wanted a method where I could clean my machine quickly and easily and in situ. This is a spare machine. It's actually a brand new one, which I'm just using for just examples to show you what I do in a minute or two. But my pasta machine sits on my workbench, I'll show it to you in a minute or two, and it never moves. And I want it there and I want it secure and I use it a lot. And I needed a method where I could clean the machine in situ, say with very limited tools, and I use the cable needle and I use some tissues. That's all, nothing wet, just dry tissues. I want to be able to clean my machine and use it straight away. One thing I would say, this is a technique that I have developed myself. I am not recommending you do this because obviously I don't know whether it's allowed by the pasta machine makers. I don't know whether it's invalidating any warranties doing what I do. So please don't follow my instructions and think, oh, this is a tutorial of how to clean it. I'm simply showing you how I clean mine. If you choose to do it yourself, that's entirely up to you. As far as I know, it does no harm to the pasta machines. It's certainly never damaged the ones I use, and I do use this Mercator Atlas, and this is a 150 that I use for my workshops and when I'm travelling around, and at home I use the 180. If you're unsure about which pasta machine to use, then nip across to the Blue Bottle Tree website, Ginger Davis Allman's wonderful site, and she's got some fantastic articles there on which pasta machines to use. Also, I've never taken off these particular bits on my pasta machine. I did once dismantle an Atlas because it had stopped working. It was very difficult to put back together, and I took these bits off, and I know you can buy machines where these bits have been removed already. Now they are perfect because they are done with these bits removed, so they're nice and stable. But my own personal experience is that when I've taken these pieces off, because of the amount of clay I use and the amount of conditioning, I mean I can use 10 or 20 packs a day, every day, I find that after a while they lose stability not having these pieces on. So I needed a way to clean the machine with these bits still on. And the trouble with these bits is this is where a lot of the clay collects, and of course it also collects on the surface underneath. So there are sort of three bits to what I'm going to show you today. One, how I clean the clay off from these big bits. Two, how I get it clean from the rollers. And three, the last little tip I have just for making sure it's completely clean before we start using the clay. I will normally do this process sort of probably every week, or certainly every 2 weeks on my normal machine, simply because doing it quickly, it'll take me a couple of minutes at most, and it keeps the clay down. However, because I knew I was doing this video, I haven't cleaned my actual machine for about sort of 6 to 8 weeks, so it's really quite dirty. So hopefully it'll show you how to get the larger amounts of clay out. I'm also going to show you on a similar size machine to this, which is the one I actually use on my workshops, which probably hasn't been cleaned for about 6 months, so the clay is really hard. So you can see what difficulty I have getting it out with this tool. Excuse me, that was the dog barking, as opposed to the amount of how easily it comes out on my machine that I use where I do these techniques all the time. So I'm just going to nip and see what the dog was barking at, and then I'll bring you back. I'll turn this one over and I'll show you where we start doing the cleaning process. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at the underneath of the pasta machine. Now, as I say, this is an absolutely brand new, never been used pasta machine, so there is no clay in this whatsoever, which is brilliant. But hopefully you can see, if I point it out with this, there's channels on both sides, and that is where the clay connects. Now on the Atlas machine, these are quite narrow. On other machines you'll get quite nice wide ones, which are really easy just to either get straight in with something like the cable needle or with a bunch of tissues and just clear out the clay. I'm using the cable needle because it's got a nice blunt point, so it's not going to scratch or damage the inside of my pasta machine. If you've got one of the pasta machines which has a heavy plate down the middle, then this technique wouldn't work so well. So if you wanted to do something similar, and I say depends on your pasta machine whether or not it's viable to do. You could just get something that bends at 90 degrees at the top, probably a loop of something, and then again get it in those grooves so there's no scratching or any damage happening to your piece. The other important thing to mention is safety issues. Now, you'll notice that when I do what I do, I always have a wad of tissues in my hand so that when I'm moving underneath the machine, my fingers are not going anywhere near any of these pieces, because on a lot of machines, a lot of pasta machines, the underneath bits of these are quite sharp and it is very easy to cut yourself. So always protect your fingers, have a wad of tissues or something so you're not putting your fingers anywhere near that. As always, it's safety first, whatever you decide to do. Right, as we've got no clay whatsoever in here, and as I say, I normally try and do this in situ, I will take you to my older machine, turn it like that, and try and get the camera angle so we can see down, so I can show you how I get it out by inserting the cable needle and some tissues. So I'll start with the 150 Atlas pasta machine that I use when I'm doing workshops and demonstrations. And I haven't cleaned this one for quite a while. So as I said, the first thing we're going to do is to get these bits up on the end underneath. And you can see here quite clearly in the reflection on the underneath of the pasta machine that I've got bits of clay. So all I do is just get that cable needle in and looking at the reflection, just hook out some of the clay. And as you can see there's quite a lot just come out from that one side. So I'll just gather all that up together. And then as a final thing, I'll just get a couple of tissues. I'll just get a couple of tissues and just push a little corner of them up inside. I don't know if you can see that from the reflection there. And then again, just put that backwards and forwards. But my fingers are nowhere near the metal. I let the tissue do all the job. And then I can turn the whole machine around and do exactly the same on the other side. And again, when I finish with that, I'll put the tissues up the inside. So the first job is always to clear out all the big lumps. You can see what big lumps there are that collect of those bits of clay from the two under bits of the pasta machine. And you can see there, although I've got a few bits out, it wasn't nearly as bad or as compacted as the one I just showed you from my workshop, because as I say, I do this one on a fairly regular basis. So doing it regularly, even though the clay collects, it's really easy to get out. And I will also, as I did before with the tissue, just push a little bit of the tissue up, not enough to get stuck or to block it, but just enough. Again, keeping my fingers well clear, I can just run backwards and forwards with the tissue, and you can see there again the tissue does help pull some extra bits out. So once those two channels are clear, I can move on to the top of the pasta machine. And as you can see, so this is one that's constantly in place and I don't want to move it, so therefore I clean it in situ. Now I start off on my thickest setting, which is 0 on my pasta machine, and I get myself a nice wodge of tissues. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run, I'll show you on this one again if I can, effectively going to run my tissues in between this area where the roller is, so right in the central groove, but I'm pushing the wad in quite tight so that the wad runs backwards and forwards and my fingers don't get anywhere near in there. And what this does is it collects a little bit on your tissue, can you also see it shows up little bits of clay as you're going backwards and forwards, which shows that there's clay stuck in there. Now some of those come off on your tissue where the scrapers have been, but other ones are just then pushed back. So what we're going to do, and this is the important bit, is we're going to turn the handle anti-clockwise, so the opposite direction to the direction you normally turn it in. And what you'll start to see happen is clay come up on the rollers, and all we then do is fairly quickly, and again I'm using the tissues, not my fingers, and I'm putting it down so that tissue is going to get both rollers at the same time as I turn the handle, so I go backwards and forwards with my tissues. And I tend to do this quite fast because I've got used to the motion, but you can do it as slowly or as quickly as you like, and you will still see, I don't know whether you can see there, you can still see there's more clay coming up in between. So again, you can go underneath, but it doesn't always collect it because it's too far up. But look, it's now going to turn up on the rollers. So again, just backwards and forwards. I get quite a lot up at this end because I do all my Skinner blends up at this end, so I will tend to spend quite a bit of time on that. But other than that, just keep revolving around. And this is actually really quite dirty. Normally if you do this every week or so, it only takes a couple of minutes to do, but this is going to be a deep clean because I've left it for a long time. Keep turning to a clean place on your tissues. When you think you've got it all, take another watch, go back on the underneath, and I can see there I haven't actually got it all, there's still more to come. Sometimes you can get it away from the underneath, but most of the time it's still a case of turning anti-clockwise and rubbing off the clay. When you've got to the stage that you do underneath and then you do the handle turn and there's nothing coming, then you know you have finished that level. And then what I will do is, if my machine is very dirty, as it is at the moment, I will simply go down one setting and repeat the whole process and work all the way down one setting at a time until I get to the last setting. If my machine's not too bad, and as I say, I do this on a regular basis, I can just see a piece under there, let's just get that piece out. So if it's not too bad, then I will miss out, I'll go every alternate setting until I get down to my thinnest possible setting or my lowest setting. So I will just carry on doing that. I will probably fast forward through because you don't need to see me doing all the different levels, but that's all I do. So you just keep going backwards and forwards, anti-clockwise, rubbing as you go and collecting all the clay. Okay, so we're down to going on to our lowest setting, and one of the laws I found is no matter how clean you think you've got up to this point, when you go on the lowest setting you do again tend to get quite a lot of clay coming up, but we'll give it a go. So yes, see, even though I've done the rest, there's still clay coming up. So I found the thickest and the thinnest settings are where you get the most clay off, but it is worth going down the in-between ones as well, because you never know whether your pasta machine's got a particular level which collects most for you. So just experiment if you're planning on doing this. Okay, again, when you think you're done, you'll be surprised because you're not quite yet. So final thing I do is I go back to my thickest setting and give another go. Yeah, you see, there's still stuff there. but not nearly as much, just the final little residue bits now. And then I'll go straight down to my thinnest, because that seems to jiggle the clay out and about a bit. But as I say, I don't do that the first time I do it. First time I go down the settings slowly, but just for the last time. And I'll do this a couple of times, going from the thickest to the thinnest, until on both settings I get no clay coming up. Once I've got it as clean as I can get it, I will go back to the setting that I will normally be using next on my pasta machine. So for me, that's setting number 3, which is the setting in which I condition most of my clay. And I'll do exactly the same on setting number 3, just to give it a final run through a couple of times. And then that's about as clean as it's going to get. And that's it. So there's quite a few bits underneath which have fallen out when we've done the rubbing process. So I'll obviously clean all of those away. And the other thing to stress is at no point was I pressing too hard. I press when I rub, but not in any way to damage the machine. And as I said before, not in any way to get my fingers anywhere near anything, so I'm not going to cut or hurt myself. So I'm not damaging myself, I'm not damaging the machine. It's all dry cloths that I'm using, or dry tissues, and they are disposable. And to do the whole of the machine, that's the amount of tissues that I have used. Okay, and there is one final thing that I do just as a little final check. I have a grubby old piece of white clay, and I'll just put it through in differing places up and down the pasta machine, just to check that I'm not getting any residue. And I'm not. Therefore, the pasta machine is clean enough to use for my whites or my translucents, or for a brand new project. So that was it. Very short and sweet. That is how I clean my pasta machine in situ, with simply using dry tissues and a cable needle. And as I say, when I do that on a regular basis, my pasta machine stays nice and clean, and it's quick and easy to do. But also, as I stressed at the start, this is simply my way of doing it. This is not saying that you need to do it this way, but it might give you some ideas as to how to clean yours. And always, always safety first. So never put your hands around any of the sharp areas of a pasta machine. Okay, I think that's it for now. I hope that was of some use, and I'll be back to my normal tutorials in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks so much for watching, and a particular thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Now that my machine is beautifully clean, I think I better start creating something with polymer clay. Bye for now. Bye.